Hi, sixth graders. We are still on Unit 7, Intro to Algebra and Equations. Today's video is rational number equations, or solving equations with rational numbers, including fractions and decimals. All right, so we want to think back to how we divide fractions and how would that information help us with a question like this. 3/4 G equals 6. So we just learned before that if a number is being multiplied by something, we're going to do the opposite, which is division, and divide it by that. So really what we would be doing then is we would be dividing, so I'm going to write it up here so I have more room. 3/4 G equals 6, and then we do our slide, and I'm going to do a different color, divide both sides by 3/4, and now we have a lot going on here, and that's a little bit confusing. But remember, when we divide fractions, we keep, change, flip. So if we look at just this right here, 6, I'm going to rewrite it right here. 6 divided by 3/4 is the same as 6 times 4/3. Keep, change, flip. So really, dividing by a fraction is the same as multiplying by its multiplicative inverse or its reciprocal, which is just flipping the fraction. So the inverse property of multiplication, now we have the inverse property of, the addition and subtraction property of equality, the division property of equality, and then the inverse property of multiplication. This says, and yes, you need to write this down, that the product of a number and its multiplicative inverse is 1. So 3/4 times 4/3 is 1, and then A over B times B over A is 1. So notice that you're just flipping it, and then you multiply together to get 1. So here, we would just flip it around, and flip it around, and then multiply it that way. That equals 1, so then we're left with G equals 6 times 4/3. If I have a whole number, I just put a 1 over it, and then I multiply. G, we'll just finish it. G equals, and then 6 times 4 is 24. 1 times 3 is 3, which equals 8. So does that make sense that 3/4 of 8 equals 6? Yes, because I'm just taking a portion of 8, almost all of it, but 3/4 of it, and that makes sense that it would be 6. We'll look at more of these as we go on. So let's refresh our memory of multiplicative inverse. So multiplicative inverse, we literally just flip the number. So the multiplicative inverse of 2/5 would be 5/2. The multiplicative inverse of 2 1/3, first we need to write it as an improper fraction. So remember, we do 3 times 2, which is 6, plus 1, so 7. Keep the denominator the same, 7/3. And then the multiplicative inverse would be 3/7. This right here is just this written as an improper fraction. Then we find the multiplicative inverse. Okay, try these ones on your own and then come back and check. So 5/6 would be 6/5. 1 1/2 would be written as 3/2, so then it would be 2/3. 8 is the same as 8 over 1, so the multiplicative inverse would be 1 over 8. And then 4/3, the multiplicative inverse would be 3/4. Very important to know multiplicative inverse because that's what we're going to be using to be figuring out our division equations. All right, so division equations involving rational numbers. Multiplication property of equality goes along with the rest of them. If we multiply each side of an equation by the same non-zero number, the two sides remain equal. So if we look here, I have 5 equals 5, multiply them both by 2, and we have the same. X over 2 equals -3. I'm going to multiply them both by 2 because x is being divided by 2. So the opposite is multiplied by 2, and I get my answer. And then here is kind of what we talked about in our first slide. We're multiplying by the reciprocal on both sides, so we get our answer. All right, so 7 equals n over 4. Write this down. Let's rewrite it. 7 equals n over 4. N over 4, I'm going to write it up here. N over 4 is the same as 1/4 n. 1/4 of n, I'm basically dividing it by 4 and taking one chunk of it, or just dividing by 4. So if I separate this, this is what I get. So the reciprocal of 1/4 is 4 over 1, and then that cancels out. So n over 4, that's why multiplying both sides by 4 is really the same as multiplying both sides by 4 over 1. So this is how we write it on this type of equation. We do the slide first. I went out of order. And then I have n over 4 times 4, which again is the same as 4 over 1. N times 4, so if I just write this here just to show you, is 4n, and then 4 times 1 is 4. Now I have, if I multiply something by 4 and then divide it by 4, that just cancels out. So then I just kind of write it like that, and that leaves n alone, and I get 28. I flip it, so my variable is on the left, and then we check. So 7 equals 28 over 4. 28 over 4 does equal 7, so n equals 28. All right, let's some more. D over 3½ equals 4 2/10. So I'm even going to rewrite it as you're writing it in your notebook. Okay, I'm still going to do my slide, but a lot of these division problems are going more out to the left. So now, just to show you, because it's being divided by 3½, I'm going to multiply both sides by 3½, and that's how I write it for these ones. So see how both sides, we're doing the same thing. That cancels out, so I'm left with D. And then to refresh our memory how to multiply fractions, 5 times 2 is 10, 5 times 4 is 20, and then add the 1, so 21, add my 0, 3 times 2 is 6, 3 times 4 is 12. Add them together, 0, 7, 4, 1. I go in 1, so it means I go in 2. I can drop my 0 after the decimal, so 14 7/10. Then I do 14 7/10 divided by 3½ equals 4 2/10. I am okay with you using your calculator on your checking problem, not everything else, but for you to check to make sure that it works out. And then we have D equals 14 7/10. You try these three on your own and come back and check. All right, 6 equals m over 8. So I'm going to multiply both sides by 8. That cancels out. 8 times 6 is 48. Leaves me with m. Flip it. And now let's rewrite it. 6 equals 48 over 8, which does equal 6, so m equals 48. P over 2 8/10 equals 1.5, so P over 2 8/10 is 1 5/10. Multiply times 2 8/10, multiply times 2 8/10. So we want to, before I move on, I want to make sure that you're thinking about this. We have a number divided by 2 8/10 to get 1½ Let's go back here. We have a number divided by 8 to get 6. That's why my number is bigger, because 48 divided by 8 equals 6. So we have to stop and make sure we're getting reasonable answers. I know that a number divided by 2 8/10 is going to equal 1.5. So my number is going to be bigger than 2 8/10, and it's going to be bigger than 1.5. Is it going to be humongous? No. Is it going to be really small? No. So before I start, I want to make sure I know in my head that it's probably going to be around 5, 6, 7, 4, not like 100. So we multiply both sides times 2 8/10. So P equals, and I'm going to do this one over here, and then I won't show you the next one. So 1.5 times 2 8/10. So that's 40. 12, and then add my 0. 2 times 5 is 10. 2 times 1 is 2 plus 1 is 3. So 0, 2, 4. And I go in 1, so in a total of 2. So it's going to be 4 2/10. That makes sense. 4 2/10 divided by 2 8/10 makes sense that it would equal 1.5. So 4.2 over, oops, not sure what happened, but 4.2 over, sorry if it paused there and glitched, I don't know what happened, equals 1.5. And if we check it, that works. So P equals 4.2. And then if I give myself some more room over here, K over 4.7 equals 2.3. So K, 4 7/10, 2 3/10. So multiply both times 4.7. And K equals 10 81/100. So then if I check that, 10 81/100 over 4 7/10 equals 2 3/10. So then you should have gotten 10.81. All right, multiplying fractions. So these are considered multiplication equations because we're multiplying by fractions. So we're going to divide, basically, technically we're dividing, but remember dividing by a fraction is the same as multiplying by the reciprocal. So lots more equations and examples that you're going to write down. So 3/4 x equals 12/20. Let's rewrite this. 3/4 x equals 12/20. We are going to multiply by both sides by the reciprocal. Because remember, 4 times 3 is 12, 3 times 4 is 12, 12/12 is 1, which leaves x alone. So over here then, we do the same. 4/3. So 12 times 4 is 48. 20 times 3 is 60. So x is 48/60, which we always put it in simplest form no matter what. So I know that 48 can be divided, I know they can both be divided by 12. So 48 divided by 12 is 4, and 60 divided by 12 is 5. So x is 4/5. So 3/4 times 4/5 equals 12/20. So we're gonna do the same. We're gonna check it underneath, but I ran out of room, so I'm gonna check it up here. 3/4 times 4/5 equals 12/20. Does that work? Yes. 3 times 4 is 12. 4 times 5 is 20. So yes, that works. So x equals 4/5. All right, you try these on your own if you feel ready, or watch me do another one and then go from there. So 1/2 x equals 8. Do my lines. I'm going to multiply times the multiplicative inverse on both sides. So times 2 over 1. And if I have a whole number, I'm going to put it over 1 as well. That cancels out, so I have x equals 16 over 1, which is just 16. So then let's check this. 1/2 times 16. So I know that half of 16 is 8, and we want it to equal 8, so then that works. X equals 16. Okay, we have 3/4 x equals 9. So we are asking ourselves 3/4 of a number equals 9. So this number is going to be greater than 9 because we're taking 3/4 of it and we're getting 9. We're not taking 3/4 of 9, we're taking 3/4 of something and we're getting 9. So I'm multiplying times the reciprocal, which is 4/3. I'm going to put a 1 under there. That leaves me with x. 9 times 4 is 36. 1 times 3 is 3. Then I just simplify. I can either do it on the next line or I can simplify it here. I know 36 times 3 is 12, divided by 3 is 12. So I'm going to rewrite it, x equals 12. Then I'm going to check 3/4 times 12, and 3/4 times the whole number would just be 12 over 1. So 3 times 12 is 36. 4 times 1 is 4. So 36 over 4 would be 9, so x equals 12. And then we have 7/8 x equals 21/64. So I'm going to multiply times 8/7. Multiply times 8/7. So that cancels out. We have x alone. You can do 21 times 8 and you can do 64 times 7 and then you can simplify it and we'll both get the same answers. I'm going to look at my cross products here and I'm going to simplify. I know that 21 and 7 can both be divided by 7. So 21 divided by 7 is 3 and 7 divided by 7 is 1. And then 64 and 8 can both be divided by 8. So 64 divided by 8 is 8 and 8 divided by 8 is 1. So now I'm left with 3 times 1 is 3 and 8 times 1 is 8. So there's my answer that I got. And if that confused you, what I just did right there, then just do your multiplying out and simplify it. But I have x equals 3/8, and I'm only circling it so you can see it. So 7/8 times 3/8 equals 21/64, and I know 7 times 3 is 21, 8 times 8 is 64, so that works. Last problem. Wilson has 9 pounds of trail mix. How many 3/4 pounds bags of trail mix can he make? So we have 3/4 pound bags. We want to know how many bags, and we have 9 pounds total. So 3/4 pound or 3/4 B equals 9. So I'm going to, let's rewrite it here, because 3/4 of each pound that we have is going to make a bag. And I have 9 pounds, so I want to know how many bags. So then we're going to multiply both sides by 4/3. We've had a few problems on here with 3/4 and the reciprocal of 3/4. So times 4/3. Remember, I'm going to add a 1 just to make it easier for my multiplication. There's my slide. That cancels because that's going to equal 1. B equals 9 times 4 is 36. 1 times 3 is 3. 36/3 is 12. So we had this problem before. This is just showing us in a word problem like what it would equal. So we know that we're going to have more than 9 bags because we're not using a whole pound to make a bag. We're taking part of a pound to make a bag. So it makes sense that we would have 12 bags. And then let's just make sure. 3/4 times 12. Let's make sure it equals 9. 3 times 12 is 36. 4 times 1 is 9. Remember 4 times 1 is 4. 36 divided by 4 is 9. So that equals here, because that's what I'm doing. I'm putting a 12 in here. So my answer would be 12 bags. All right, that's all I have. This is a confusing lesson, so if you're totally confused, it's okay. We're going to keep going through it and doing more problems. The more examples that you have, the better you are. The better you are. But I do expect that you have all of these examples from all of these videos for this unit. All right, have a great night.